What is up, Pauper players? Welcome back to another Salt and Pauper Saturday video. And today we are going to continue our recent trend of experimenting with new decks in the new meta since the Monastery Swiftspear ban. And I have a spicy Esper Bridges brew for you today. This is sort of a fusion of Jeskai Ephemerate control mixed with an Esper artifact control package that's using Tithing Blade and Flicker effects to control the opponent's board while ramping out Enforcers and the card draw that the artifact sub-package brings, and then finishing the game with Kenku Artificers. This deck has a lot of control elements. It's one of the few artifact decks that I have seen that is not afraid to go long, and you will definitely see examples of that in the games today. But let's jump in to the deck tech, and let's show you what I'm working with. All right, everyone, welcome to the deck tech for Esper Bridges by Groggy MTG. This is from the recent 5-0 drop last week, and it caught my eye and definitely was something that I wanted to mess around. Definitely was something that I wanted to mess around with, as I am a huge fan of the Affinity archetype in general. I've played some variant of Affinity all the way back since original Mirrodin was released, and I've always had a soft spot for it. And this deck is no exception, although I will say, just leading it out for those of you playing on MTGO, this deck does require time management. There were several games where I found myself low on time because this deck has so much it can do and so many opportunities for interaction. You have to keep your clock very, very well managed, and that may be a struggle for some of you that are less accustomed to playing a control deck. So keep that in mind going in. For those of you playing paper, this deck performs great, and you will not have any issues with time. Starting us out with the mana base, we have a pretty interesting mix. Let's start with the four ofs here. So we have 4 Mist Vault Bridges. This is the black-blue land. We have 4 Razortide Bridges. This is the white-blue land. We have 4 Seed of the Synods, the blue artifact land. We have 3 islands, 2 Vault of Whispers, 2 Goldmire Bridges, a single Ancient Den, and a Swamp. And over the course of my games with this deck, I have definitely seen the land split come through, but I have also definitely had a little bit of struggles with it. So the Lembas, the treasures from the Deadly Disputes are definitely critical in making sure that you are able to cast all your spells, so keep that in mind. Leading us out on the 1-drops, we have 2 Ephemerates, 2 Blood Fountains, and 2 Candy Trails. 4 counter spells, 4 Deadly Disputes, and then we have 3 cast downs with a 4th in the board, 3 Tithing Blades, and 2 Lembas. Going into the 3-drops, we have 3 Kenku Artificers. We have a single Suffocating Fumes in the main board and a single Ghostly Flicker in the main board. And you'll see these Ephemerates and these Ghostly Flickers, and you'll wonder what they're for. Well, that's what our 4-drops are here for. We have 2 Archaeomancers and 2 Thorn of the Black Rose. Flickering Thorn of the Black Rose, as you know, regains the Monarch if you have lost it, and in a deck like this, in a metagame full of red, getting the Monarch back can be fairly important, so you can be less afraid of playing it into a board because you know you can steal it back with 1 mana. We also use those to flicker our Kenku Artificers to generate a ton of 3/3 flying artifacts. That allows us to close out games pretty quickly once we've stabilized, as well as these Enforcers that we can recur. And then we have Tithing Blade, which is the new drop from Caverns of Ixalan, and this is a 2-mana artifact that allows you to have an opponent sacrifice a creature. Now, you can craft this with a creature for 5 mana. It turns into something that drains your opponent for 1 each upkeep, but that is not the focus that we are going to be using, although it can be used to help close out longer games in the control mirrors, especially if your opponent is gaining a bunch of life and has a bunch of 1-for-1 removal. This deck can struggle against that regardless of the amount of flicker and recursion. So being able to stack up a few of these definitely helps go the distance there. We close out the deck with 4 Thoughtcasts and 4 Enforcers. This is kind of our big payoff for the artifact sub-theme. It gives us a lot of cheap draw in the Deadly Dispute Thoughtcast and some cheap aggression in the Enforcer. This main deck, Suffocating Fumes, actually comes in a lot of handy against the red decks in the format right now. And then these 3 cast downs do a lot of heavy lifting in game 1. Tithing Blade being flickered with Ghostly Flicker definitely does a lot of work as well. So don't sleep on that. And then we have our sideboard. Our sideboard is pretty standard, but you'll notice the numbers are a little bit interesting. So we have 5 red blast effects. This is 2 Hydroblast, 3 blue elemental blast, but you can split it however you have it. We have 2 Turnicides. This is primarily to fight things like Dust to Dust and other exile effects that will be targeting our 3/3 bridges once we've Kenku'd them. So it definitely helps there. We have a single negate. This is here to increase the amount of counter magic we have against opposing Tithing Blade matchups, as that is one of the better cards against the deck that is trying to make a whole bunch of indestructible creatures. We have 2 Duresses for those same control matchups, just to kind of clear the way through counter spells if we need to. We have that 4th cast down, which can come in and does do good things against like the red goblins deck, where things like Tithing Blade are less helpful. So against red, you're going to be probably taking out these 3 Tithing Blades and bringing in these 3 effects, this spot removal and 2 board wipes. To that effect, we have our 2nd Suffocating Fumes and a single Drown in Sorrow. And then we have 2 Nihil Spell Bombs. This is to stop other decks that are more graveyard and control-y oriented from outvaluing us as we go into the late game. So that is the deck. Very, very interesting deck. A little bit of a fusion of something like a Ghostly Flicker, Ephemerate, Archaeomancer value loop with this Tithing Blade. We have some control elements in the Monarch, and then we have an artifact aggro sub-theme and a control finisher in Kenku Artificer that sort of parallels the Jeskai Wildfires deck. Really, really interesting deck. Love the counter spells. Definitely adds an element that I think this deck needs in order to fight the other control decks and slow down some of the more aggressive aggro and mid-range decks. Cast downs do a lot of heavy work against things like Delvers and Cryptic Serpents and things of that nature. So definitely a fun deck to pilot. I had a ton of fun playing it all week. We have a couple of great matches to showcase the different styles this deck can play as. First up, we are going to be playing against a deck that seemed like it had all the hate in the world. So let's show you what that matchup looks like to show you just how resilient this deck can be with these counterspells and these Turnicides and things like that against decks that are packing a whole bunch of artifact removal. So let's jump in to match number 1. All right, this is match number 1. This is game 1 against Airplay. Let's see what our opening hand looks like today. We are on the draw, and we look down in this hand, and it is okay. We definitely have most of our colors. We don't have a ton to do, but 2 lands, Candy Trail, Deadly Dispute, and then we have the Archaeomancer Ephemerate value for when we start to get some counterspells in the yard. It's not too bad here. We are going to be keeping this, and then off to battle we go. Opponent leads on a Thornglint Bridge, which is very interesting in this meta. You don't see those very often. We're just going to lead on a tap land. Opponent goes Nested Shambler and a Rancor, and that's a really interesting start. It shows us the opponent is on some kind of token strat, I would assume. We lead on a Candy Trail here. Top decking a second Ephemerate really isn't what we were hoping for there, but it is what it is. Opponent has a Virulent Strike to attack us for 5 there. We keep the Deadly Dispute up. Opponent hits us for another 5. That's fine. Opponent goes Core Skyfisher to bounce this Abundant Growth, and it definitely seems like they're on a really interesting Abzan brew here. We top deck a Suffocating Fumes, which is super good for us because we see that Nested Shambler on the board. We're going to go Deadly Dispute here, setting up a turn in which we can remove the Core Skyfisher and then nuke the Nested Shambler tokens. Opponent had double Brave the Wilds to animate 2 bridges, and unfortunately we were just not able to stabilize, even with a cast down off the top here, just not going quite fast enough to stabilize the game. So a good game 1 win from the opponent. Let's go to the next game. All right, game number 2 against Airplay. We are on the play as we lost game 1. You can see the sideboard plan here. We took out 2 Thorn of the Black Rose, an Ephemerate, and we brought in those 3 extra removal spells, which was a single Suffocating Fumes, a Drown in Sorrow, and our 4th Cast Down. Really trying to capitalize on the opponent for having an aggro strategy. We don't have a ton to do with those 3/3 Indestructible Bridges, but we do have those 3 main deck sacrifice effects, so we're going to run it with those, try to keep the opponent's board under control, and then just make the opponent sacrifice the bridges, as that is the game plan. Let's see what our opening hand looks like. Hand is pretty good. We have all 3 of our colors. We have Thoughtcast, Double Deadly Dispute, Mirror Enforcer. That's definitely a reasonable keep here, although it is a little bit slow. We have no control elements and no removal, but this is good enough to keep with, so let's run it. Leading off on the bridge there, we want our black available for us so that we can lead on an untapped land if we need to for Deadly Dispute. Just playing around something like a artifact removal or exile effect off the opponent. Didn't see anything like that in game 1, so hoping we don't have to worry about it. We top deck a Blood Fountain there, which is nice. We're just going to go for a Thoughtcast there and play a 3rd tapped land. Opponent going a little bit wide for us here. This Tithing Blade really not looking great. We Thoughtcast into a 2nd Mirror Enforcer. We're able to play both there. Opponent has a Troublemaker Oof, which is pretty brutal, but they do sacrifice their token, which helps us for this Tithing Blade. We're going to Deadly Dispute it just to get some value out of it. Opponent doesn't attack. We're going to attack into the opponent here. Try to induce a block. Opponent does bite, which is great for us. We are able to get all the Nested Shambler tokens on the board and then Drown in Sorrow away to clean the opponent's board. We do still have a Deadly Dispute up just in case the opponent goes for some sort of an exile effect or another Troublemaker Oof. We're going to hold those open a lot during this match, just to make sure we don't get blown out by an exile. Tithing Blade away the opponent's Warehouse Tabby here, which is great for us. Lead on this Candy Trail. Going to put a Deadly Dispute on top, just so that we can continue to churn through cards. A lot of lands in hand, which is pretty unfortunate. We do still have this Blood Fountain to buy back these double Mirror Enforcers, which is great. Pass back from the opponent, which is pretty important. He goes to Rancor our own Mirror Enforcer and then Troublemaker Oof it. Now, there was definitely a line where we could have Deadly Disputed our own Mirror Enforcer to remove the Rancor, just fizzle it so it doesn't go back to his hand. I like not to do that and to make them spend the mana to Troublemaker Oof. Questionable whether or not that's the right line, because they wouldn't have been able to bargain this if we get rid of it, but I didn't know if they had a follow-up enchantment or something as a backup, and I didn't want to leave my shields down and sacrifice a Mirror Enforcer. I didn't have to, so I make them do it, and then I get the value out of it just to make sure that they've spent their mana. We go ahead and Deadly Dispute, we get a Lemboss off the top. Have a lot of mana available to us. We get another Tithing Blade, which is great. Just control the opponent's board. We're going to swing in for 7 with this Kenku. We're going to hold Candy Trail, tap, and sacrifice up with these treasure tokens rather than commit this Lemboss to the board. There's no reason to play that out at this stage, since we've definitely turned the corner, and the opponent realizes that and scoops it up. Not sure if the opponent was just out of options there or his hand really didn't come together. 6 cards in hand, not playing anything, and we've seen a lot of their deck here is cheap creatures, so definitely had me wondering what it is that the opponent could be having in hand here. And it leaves me to kind of look back on that game 1 and realize they probably have some more pump spells than just the Virulent Strike to work with, so definitely need to be aware of that in game 3. But let's start game 3. All right, game 3 against Airplay. We are on the draw. And we, realizing they had a whole bunch of non-creatures in hand last time, bring in the 2 Duresses for 1 Kenku Artificer and 1 Archaeomancer, and dropping a Ghostly Flicker in place of that Ephemerate, realizing that if they have removal spells, we want the Ephemerate over the Ghostly Flicker, and a Kenku Artificer against exile effects is pretty bad, so we're just going to drop 1, keep the other 2, because we don't want to lose too many creatures. But overall, we don't want the Thorn of the Black Roses against a bunch of 1/1 tokens. The Ghostly Flicker Archaeomancer is fine. We just have 1 Archaeomancer with the 2 Ephemerates in main to help us dodge some removal. And then we dropped a Kenku for the 2 Duresses. That's going to let us try to remove things like Rancors from our opponent early to stop the aggression. It's also going to stop things like Virulent Strikes and stuff like that. And hopefully we can run them out of enchantments for those Troublemaker oofs. Let's take a look at our hand to start game number 3. This is not the best hand in the world. Doesn't have all 3 colors, but we are only running the 2 Ephemerates, so the white splash isn't super important with this hand. We do have Duress into Deadly Dispute and Lembas. We have a Kenku if we can get there, and Mer Enforcer, so we're definitely going to keep this hand. Let's run it. Opponent starts on a Nested Shambler here. Definitely not the start we were hoping for, especially with a hand with no removal and no board wipes. Goes Abundant Growth here into a Virulent Swipe. That tells me they don't have a Rancor in hand. But because we top another bridge that allows us to have white, we are going to drop our Duress there. Opponent shows us Troublemaker Oof, a bridge, and a Skyfisher along with an Echoing Courage. We go ahead and get rid of this Echoing Courage from the opponent, which would be pretty good with all of these Squirrel tokens, but we do see that they don't have any way to sacrifice them. And if they want to play this Troublemaker Oof to exile one of our lands, we do have to, or they do have to sacrifice their mana fixing, so their core Skyfisher wouldn't be playable at the moment. So definitely liking our position here, although the opponent hitting one of our lands would be a bit of a blow. We do still have an untapped land if we need it to keep this Lembas up, and I would like to keep this Deadly Dispute up if we need to. We can bluff Counterspell that way too, which is helpful, so definitely something to consider. Opponent just going to run out the Skyfisher now, which says to me that they probably want to play the Airy Oofs, or the Troublemaker Oofs next turn. They're just going to hit us for another 3. We got a 14. We're going to play the Lembas, draw a Candy Trail off the top. Opponent does go for the Troublemaker Oofs, exiles our white source, which is annoying, but not super impactful. We hit a white source anyway, so we're able to just go for the Candy Trail here. We bottom 2 lands. We're just going to commit and play this Mer Enforcer because we know they don't have another removal spell, and this will slow down the attacks. Unfortunately, past my priority through blocking here, so I'm not able to block this Troublemaker Oof, which is super annoying. But we do just commit the Kenku here and keep an untapped land, knowing that the opponent doesn't have another Troublemaker Oof available since they don't have any tokens or enchantments. Opponent attacks with all 3, which definitely signifies some shenanigans. We go ahead and block into them. We block the Mer Enforcer onto the Troublemaker Oofs and the 3/3 onto the Skyfisher, obviously, but we put the Kenku in front of the Nested Shambler. That way, if they want to pump it, it's not going to die, and that's pretty important here. Opponent commits a full Vines of the Vastwood to kill my Kenku, which is totally okay with me. We're able to take 2 of his creatures down, which is great. And then the opponent has a Village Rites to cash in on a whole bunch of squirrels, which is pretty dicey because we are at 6 life. They then show us an Omen for a Skyfisher, which says to me that they're probably going to play the Skyfisher, bounce the Omen, then replay the Omen to get the Troublemaker Oof, and play the Troublemaker Oof, sacrificing the Omen for Bargain. That would be the line that I would anticipate by getting the Skyfisher. So that says we definitely want to keep Deadly Dispute up here. We know that they're going to be Troublemaker Oofing us next turn. We are at a relatively low life total. We know we're going to be taking some from the squirrels. We just have to hope they don't have like an Echoing Courage or something to pump through us. We go ahead and Tithing Blade one of the dudes out just to decrease the amount of damage we're going to be taking. They do exactly Core Skyfisher pick up, get the Troublemaker Oof, and then sacrifice it. They go for the Exile on the bridge, so we're forced to Deadly Dispute there not to lose out on too much. They do attack. We're able to eat a squirrel, but we still take 3 going down to 3, which is scary. We are on the verge of stabilizing this game. We just have to get long enough to be able to start cracking these foods to gain some life out of it. We're able to play the other Kenku to line up our defenses the exact same way as last time. Opponent goes for the kill shot with a Vines of Vastwood on a squirrel, but we have the cast down. So we do cast down the squirrel. That means we're only taking 1 here and we go to 2, which is great. That was the best case scenario, and we have a counterspell up for next turn. We're able to eat all their creatures except for 1 squirrel. We have a counterspell for anything they might have after this. And then we finally get time to start cracking these foods. We hit a Thoughtcast into a Thoughtcast into a Myr Enforcer, which is fantastic. Now we have counterspell and cast down up just in case they have another pump spell or something to finish us off. They go for the Troublemaker. We're able to counterspell it. The opponent sees the writing on the walls. They're down to 2 cards, and they go ahead and scoop it up because we have effectively stabilized. GG's to the opponent. Great round 1 to show you what this deck is looking to do. It's definitely a unique take on an Affinity deck. It plays way more control-y than any other Affinity variant I've seen. Really, really like how much power the Tithing Blade adds to this deck. Grixis Affinity has always been a very control-y, kind of mid-rangey deck, but this takes that to the value extreme for sure. So if you like that value grindy aspect of Grixis Affinity, definitely give this a try. Now that you've seen it against something that kind of has all the main board exiles, we're going to play it against something else that definitely has a lot of hate threats against us, but is a little bit more meta. So let's jump into match number 2 and see what we're playing. All right, match number 2, we are against Luthien 24. We lose the die roll, so we are on the draw. Let's see our opening hand here. This is an interesting opening hand. We do have a Blood Fountain and an Artifact land. We have Ephemerate, but we don't have Counterspell mana, which is pretty awkward. We don't really have anything to do either. We don't have a Deadly or a Lambos or anything to follow it up with and smooth out our draws. Not even a Thoughtcast to cash in on. We are going to mulligan that away. This hand looks much better, so we're definitely keeping this one. We're going to throw one of these Seed of the Synods back just because we already have 3 land in hand and a Deadly. And off to the races we go. Opponent shows us a Rustveil Bridge, which means almost always the opponent is on Boros. Typically Boros Synthesizer, but there is a Boros control deck from Mr. Snapbolt that does have a little bit of game still in this meta because it's more control-oriented. We're going to lead on a Deadly Dispute, sacking our blood token to trade it in for a treasure token, trying to smooth out our draws. Opponent goes for the Barb Batterfist Glint Hawk, so they have confirmed they are on Boros Synthesizer. That's a pretty good start from the opponent. It makes our Tithing Blade look pretty bad, but we are going to lead on the Tithing Blade just to minimize the opponent's aggression here. We have a double cast down lineup, so we definitely have some things to do, and Boros does not have the most creatures unless they are a Kuldotha variant, so hopefully we're able to just run them out of creatures, but let's see how it goes. Opponent replays that Barb Batterfist we knew was coming. loads up with a Lembas, hits us for 2, which is fine, passes back. We're going to go with the Lembas of our own. We hit an artifact land, which is great. It turns on this Myr Enforcer. We have Deadly Dispute up, which is good. That way, if the opponent has a Galv Blast or something for our Myr Enforcer, we can get some value out of it. They synthesize her into a Makeshift, which is pretty scary. They go ahead and attack for 3. Now, we could have cast down this Glinthawk with Makeshift Munitions on the stack, but then they wouldn't have had to equip. And they may have had a follow-up plan. We go ahead and Candy Trail here. We have a Deadly Dispute in hand again, and still have another cast down. We attack and they block, which is pretty questionable. But they play a Thraben Inspector and immediately crack the clue, taking their entire turn. So it says to me they don't have a ton of proactive plays left. We're just going to attack. They go for a Galv Blast, and we're able to Ephemerate it. They Synthesizer. We're going to go ahead and Deadly Dispute at end of turn just for value. We're going to neglect to play our Ephemerate from exile just to be able to continue the attacks with this Myr Enforcer. Fortunately, we do see an Ephemerate from this Candy Trail and then draw it with the Lembas, so we do still have the Galv Blast protection. Double cast down in hand. Opponent goes for the Bolt to kill it. We have the Ephemerate again. So opponent has tried to kill it not once, but twice now. Opponent starts sacking Synthesizers, shows us a Great Furnace, and a Rustvale Bridge, which is great. They are starting to hit lands and run out of steam. Opponent on 2. We are going to cast this Ephemerate just so that we have the option of hitting one of our Archaeomancers. We go for the Deadly Dispute there. Top deck a Thought Cast in a land, which is pretty nice. It allows us to keep this counter spell up. Opponent's going to sack another Synthesizer. Go for a Lembas. This is fine. And then goes for a Barbed Batterfist. We let that resolve just to make sure that we have the counter spell if they want to try to kill this Myr Enforcer again, because right now it really is all that we have going for us, and we need to protect it. We go for a Tithing Blade here. Start eating into the opponent's resources again. Thoughtcast, and we keep Counterspell and Cast Down up. Attack, and the opponent tries to double block to trade the Enforcer. We're able to cast down 1 and make sure that we eat both, which is fantastic. Opponent definitely falls for the bluff there. We still have Counterspell and Cast Down up. Opponent goes for the Dawnbringer Cleric and exiles our Ephemerate, which is pretty unfortunate. Definitely could have counterspelled that. But they do hit the Galv Blast, so we have the counterspell to save Myr Enforcer again, which is fantastic. This Myr Enforcer has lived through 4 potential deaths and is still here. We top deck Ghostly Flicker, which is pretty amazing. We're going to double buyback our Tithing Blades and eat both the opponent's creatures, hit them for 4. Opponent finally has a Galv Blast that does resolve on our Myr Enforcer, but we have a Thorn of the Black Rose to start the Monarch. We have a cast down and to protect it just in case they have some crazy haste threat. Opponent goes for a recommission on their Glinthawk. Bounces and replays a Lembas, which is really interesting because they could have bounced and replayed a Barbed Batterfist for an extra creature. It might have actually been a better play, but they're really counting on the Glinthawk to get the Monarch back from us with flying. We crack a food at end of turn. We attack for 1 just to see if they'll try to trade. And then when they don't, we have the cast down. We're going to Kenku. Animate one of our bridges. The opponent go ahead and pings the Kenku off just in case we do have another flicker, which is fine. We let that resolve. Opponent has a Cast in Fire, which is pretty brutal. To exile our bridge in order to attack through it, but then we're going to go ahead and cast down their Glinthawk. And then we'll use our mana to pop our Blood Fountain, buy back our Kenku and our Myr Enforcer before that land exiles. Opponent has a Lightning Bolt for our Black Rose, but we still have our Myr Enforcer. He's back. We're going to replay Kenku. Opponent is going to ping it off again, but we have an animated 3/3 now. We have a Mirror Enforcer. We're going to go ahead and Lembas. We'll keep Counterspell mana available just in case, but we are able to get in for 7 here, and the opponent is dead on board next turn if they don't have anything to do about it. They are out of cards in hand, so they definitely need to top deck some action. And the opponent scoops it up. They weren't dead on board after all of their food cracks, but the opponent likely hit a blank off the top and knew that the game was over. GG's to the opponent for game number 1. Let's go to game number 2. Now, this is a very scary matchup in game number 2 because they have a ton of sideboard options. They have Cast into the Fire. They also have things like Dust to Dust and Revoke Existence, you know, Old Faithfuls that are very, very good. With the Synthesizer version, Dust to Dust seems less likely, but we definitely need to be aware that's a threat. All right, game number 2 in match 2 against Luthien 24. Now, we know things like Revoke Existence and Cast into Fire and Dust to Dust are available options for the opponent, and we saw Cast into Fire in the main board, so we definitely know that that deck has something coming at us. We saw a lot of white from the opponent in lots of Glinthawks and things like that, so we don't bring in our 5 blue counter spells plus a negate against that in this game 2, thinking that just the Turnicides are going to be enough for us here. We take out our single counter spell and an Ephemerate to bring in 2 Turnicides, thinking that they have a similar effect and are going to be a little more efficient. Ephemerate not going to cost us an attack, and the counterspell being 2 mana versus 1. Let's run game number 2. We're on the draw. Let's see what our opening hand looks like. Drowned Sorrow, Turnacide, Deadly, double Kenku. This hand would be great if it had 1 more land. Unfortunately, it does not. Unfortunately, we are going to have to ship this because relying on top decking a land just is not in my playbook. Fortunately, the opponent also mulls to 6 cards here. We look at this hand, it's really interesting, but unfortunately, again, it is just not a keep. We don't even have Counterspell with our 2 lands, and we have these Mirror Enforcers are so far from sight because we have no black mana, so we can't even hope to top deck a Blood Fountain. Fortunately, we have to ship this one back too. Funny enough, the opponent also ships to 5, so we're not even taking a penalty for this double mulligan, which is fantastic. This is a much more keepable hand. We have all 3 colors. We have 2 bridges. We have 2 drops. We have Archaeomancer Ephemerate, which is a value engine with this cast down in this matchup. But looking at this hand, I think the Archaeomancer and Ephemerate are the furthest from actually coming together, and we've seen the opponent running Bolt and Galvblast, so Archaeomancer likely is not ever going to survive for an Ephemerate to resolve on it. So we're just going to throw those back, and we're going to run it with 3 lands, cast down Tithing Blade, and try to run the opponent out of creatures, just like we did last time. Game number 2, here we go. Opponent starts at 21 with a tap land, which is fine. We top deck another Archaeomancer, which is okay. At least it's going to be able to buy us a cast down. Opponent leads on double Thraben Inspector, which is pretty scary. We don't have a second black for this Drowned in Sorrow, which is pretty sad. Really going to hope to hit something to get that. We're going to Tithing Blade early just to try to minimize the opponent's aggro plan. Opponent leads on a Relic early, which hurts us quite a bit. And then Synthesizers into a land. We hit a land drop, but it's not a black land, which is pretty brutal. Opponent has a Lembas, starts to smooth out their draws, isn't missing land drops, then has a Gorilla Shaman for us. We wait for the activation and then go ahead and cast down it with the land that he was going to destroy anyway. Opponent exiles a card, beats us for 1. We pay all 3 of our mana to drop this Mirror Enforcer. Hopefully it can stem the bleeding and slow things down. Opponent has a Glinthawk to pick up their Synthesizer. Their Synthesizer hits a Cast into the Fire, which is pretty brutal. They exile our Mirror Enforcer. We top deck a Lembas, which helps. We Lembas into a Mirror Enforcer, but we can't even replay it. 1 artifact short of that. Opponent just leads on Glinthawk into a Skyfisher, starts doing the Boros things, and then Revoke Existences us which hurts pretty bad. We tap out for a Mirror Enforcer again, really feeling the punish of that Revoke Existence and the Cast into Fire. Opponent just hits for 4, down to 8, and then double Gal Blast to finish us off real fast. That was not even close. GG to the opponent for a strong game 2 comeback. But let's head into game number 3 and make some sideboard changes. All right, game number 3, we are going to be on the play against Luthien 24. We have made a lot of changes. We saw Relic come down very early from the opponent, and we saw Dawnbringer Cleric, so we know that Graveyard Exile is in their game. So we just full take out all of the Archaeomancer value package, and we maximize on our counter and control game. We still keep out the 1 Kenku and the double Thorn of the Black Rose. Opponent went a little faster than we wanted to see, and we know that they can generate some tokens, so we are going to have these Thorn of the Black Roses sit on the sideline, and we take out the full Flicker package and 1 Kenku. We're bringing in all 5 of our anti-blue spell, or anti-red spells. We're bringing in the Negate, and we're keeping in that Drown in Sorrow. Let's run it like that. Let's see what our hand looks like. This is Hydroblast on turn 1, but we only have 1 artifact land, so this Thoughtcast is not castable, and we don't have Counterspell, we don't have Deadly Dispute, we don't have Cast Down because we have no black mana. Unfortunately, this is a mulligan. Once again, going to 5. This is pretty brutal. This is also a mulligan. We can't keep a 1-land hand in this deck. We just can't. Opponent starts with 7. They don't give us the same benefit as last time, both going down to 5. But this is a much better hand for us. We have all 3 of our colors. We have Blood Fountain, we have Hydroblast, Candy Trail to smooth out our draws. We have a Cast Down for removal. Deciding what to put back from this hand is pretty tricky, actually. I do think the Island could probably go. And then, let's see, we're going to put back the Blood Fountain. We just don't have any reason to go wide on artifacts early right here. We don't have a Mirror Enforcer, we don't have a Thoughtcast, so we don't really have any payoffs. I think we're just going to try to use this Candy Trail to smooth out our draws, and then we're going to rely on some control with this Hydroblast and Cast Down. Here we go. Lead on the blue-white land. Obviously, we want to have Hydroblast up as soon as possible. We top deck the Thoughtcast, so unfortunately we are a little bit punished for putting the Blood Fountain back. We miss a land drop, which is a little sad. We go ahead and put the Candy Trail onto the battlefield to smooth out our land draws, so we bottom 2 cards that aren't land. We top deck a Lembas, which is pretty brutal. Obviously, we want to hit our land drops here. We draw off the Candy Trail at end of turn. We just want to hold open our control. We top deck a Turn Aside, but we do have a land drop, which is pretty good. We go ahead and Thoughtcast into a land drop, which is great. Now we have double Counterspell open. Opponent goes for a Relic, but now that we've taken all of our Graveyard Recursion outside of Blood Fountain and we bottomed a Blood Fountain out of the deck, we really have no reason to care about that Relic. We hit another land, which is great. We just want to keep hitting land drops. We're going to go ahead and Lembas. We are on the control game plan here, so we're going to hold all of our counter magic up. Opponent is just land going with us, which is fantastic for us. We're going to Thoughtcast. We hit 2 Mirror Enforcers and another artifact land, so we're just going to double drop both with full counter magic backup. Opponent goes through Revoke Existence. We have a Turn Aside. Opponent goes for a Gal Blast. We're going to go ahead and counterspell that just to make sure that we hold some of our less conditional counterspells up. We have another Thoughtcast here. We hit double land drops. Now we still have Negate, Counterspell, Hydroblast. Opponent goes for a Cast into Fire. We're going to Hydroblast that. We're going to hold this Negate and Counterspell up. Opponent has a Glint Hawk, which is fine. We have Cast Down for that if we need to, but probably not going to need to. We sacrifice this Lembas just to gain some life and put it back in the deck for top for top decks, so we can redraw it if we need to. Opponent blocks and goes for a lightning bolt. We're going to negate it. Opponent goes for a recommission on the Glint Hawk, but we have the cast down to make sure that we're able to put the opponent on 1. Opponent has a Glint Hawk, which is unfortunate. So we can't attack them down to 1, but we just attack with both. We make them choose whether they double block. They do, so we have the cast down for the 3/3. They go to 5. They have a Dawnbringer Cleric here. Now, we could have countered this Dawnbringer Cleric to deny them a blocker, but we have 4 other cards in their hand that we do not know. Chances are they have other creatures. So we let the Dawnbringer Cleric resolve with the game plan of just countering something that kills our Myr Enforcers, because currently they are stronger than anything else the opponent can do. They gain 2 life, which is annoying, and then show us a Skyfisher. So we can counter the Skyfisher here. But again, we're just kind of on the plan of let these Myr Enforcers do the job, and a Skyfisher and a Dawnbringer Cleric, even if they replay the Dawnbringer Cleric, cannot kill a Myr Enforcer, so we're okay with this so far. If they have a 3rd creature, that's probably when we have to counterspell, so we let this Core Skyfisher resolve. They do bounce and replay the Dawnbringer Cleric to gain 2 more life. They go back up to 9. Now they have 2 cards in hand after playing a land drop. We top deck a Blue Elemental Blast, which is great. Means that if they have another Lightning Bolt or something to finish off a Myr Enforcer, we have a Blue Blast, but they don't. They just top deck and play a land and pass the turn back and then scoop it up. GG's to the opponent, a fantastic 2-1 and great showing for this deck against Boros, which is a deck absolutely packed full of hate. And let's show you guys this bonus match. This bonus match is crazy. It was a game 1 that went all the way and has a pretty tragic ending. So let's show you what this bonus game looks like. All right, guys, starting out our bonus game. This is a wild game 1 from a test match I played during the week. This is against Cinder 4. We win the die roll, so we are on the play. And get a snack, get a drink, and buckle in, because this match goes the full distance. This is a really interesting opening hand. We don't have a ton of action to do, but we do have all of our colors and a counterspell, and we have double Archaeomancer to buy back the counterspell, or we have Archaeomancer and a Thoughtcast to buy back the counterspell or the Thoughtcast and keep digging. Definitely an easy keep here, but 1 more land than I think we would have liked. Off we go. We're going to lead on a tap land. Opponent leads on an idyllic beachfront, which tells me that they're probably on, like, Coggates. Opponent has Nomads in core, which means maybe they're on the Cephalid Breakfast combo version of Coggates, but then we see an island and a Spiketail Hatchling, which is super interesting, because I haven't seen any gates yet, which makes me think they're probably not on Coggates. We just kind of land, go into Thoughtcast, top deck a couple of creatures. Opponent has Spiketail and a Nomads. They're just going to ping us for 2 there. We Candy Trail into 2 good spells, so we keep 2 good spells. We keep a counterspell up, expecting a combo from the opponent here. They do miss a land drop or 2 on the way, which is pretty good for us. It buys us a lot of time because the opponent has 5 mana to their combo. They play a Loyal Sentry, which is a card I've never seen before. Really interesting 1/1 for 1 that when it blocks, it destroys that creature and itself. Really interesting. I do have the ability to attack here to force some blocks. Fortunately, the opponent sacrificed their Spiketail Hatchling to this Tithing Blade. Seems very questionable to me. Definitely probably should have sacrificed the Loyal Companion, but not sure. Opponent does go for the quad block here to trade with the second Myr Enforcer and blocks the Loyal Sentry for this one. We wait for the Loyal Sentry trigger, and then we go ahead and Ghostly Flicker. Opponent does have a counterspell, but and then we let them full trade. They do save the Nomads in core with some ability activations there when we block out. The Muldrifter gets evoked, but they hit a land drop, which helps them. We're able to Archaeomancer back this Ghostly Flicker, which is going to be pretty key with this deck. Really want to control their board and make them sacrifice things with this Tithing Blade, so that is definitely the game plan. We're going to go for the Ghostly Flicker here. They do have a counterspell, but so do we. So we're going to eat the Spirited Companion with this Tithing Blade activation. And we're going to start whittling down their board. That is now the game plan. We do have a scary turn here because we don't have a counterspell up, and if they had a land drop that was untapped and their Cephalid Constable, they could have gone for it there. We play a Kenku just to give us some sort of clock. Maybe we should have attacked there, but we wanted to keep some things open. Opponent goes for a Man of War to bounce our creature. We do Ghostly Flicker the Archaeomancer and the Kenku to animate a different bridge for a blocker. Opponent just plays another Nomad. We're going to eat a creature with Tithing Blade and this Ghostly Flicker again. We do mistap though. We should have tapped this blue source instead of this black source. Just so that we have Deadly Dispute up still, because currently we do not. I apologize, guys. The playback of the game is broken. This is my third time trying to record this game, and it always stalls at this exact point and interaction. Not sure why or what's causing it, as all the other game replays work just fine. But this game goes to the absolute wire. It goes to under 10 minutes per person. I think we end up losing the game because I accidentally passed priority through blockers to take lethal damage after turning the corner and stabilizing against the opponent in a game that I definitely should have won. But ultimately, I was down about 2 minutes after game 1 ended, so I ended up scooping the match to the opponent. GG's to Cinder4. Really wish I could show you guys the end of this game, as it was fantastic, but sadly the replay feature for some reason is not playing along. But guys, that is the showcase of this Esper Bridges Affinity Control deck. I genuinely hope you try this deck out. It was a lot of fun to play, and it really does feel like it just has an angle for everything. Definitely a cool deck. Mind your time, that was the main struggle I had with this deck while playing it. But overall, a ton of fun to play. I hope you enjoyed this video. For those of you celebrating the holidays, I hope you have a great holiday season. Merry Christmas. And I will catch you guys next time. As usual, guys, if you've made it this far in the video, please hit the subscribe button, or at least consider subscribing. It definitely helps out the channel, and I do appreciate it. We've had a fantastic year on this channel, and I hope to have another fantastic year next year. I do have some amazing things planned for 2024, so hopefully you guys stick with me, and we'll have some fun next year. As usual, guys, goodbye forever, unless I see you next time.